So you want to start farming. And the only barrier between you and getting farming is the cost of land and finding affordable and accessible land. And that is a huge issue, and you're struggling with it. Well, you've come to the right place, because today's entire video is going to be dedicated to alternative ways of finding land, different options for you to get your hands a hold of land to start building your farm, your homestead, your economic dreams, by producing your own food. This is the way. So we are going to get into several different ways. We're going to even talk about the way that I got this entire farm, which is definitely a little different than the usual way. And we're going to just talk about some opportunities, some resources that are out there. Now, before we get into today's episode, as always, please support the channel. Like, leave a comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell. We need all the help we can get. Share it with your friends. If you know someone that's looking for a farm or looking to have a farm, send them this video, okay? Because I'm hoping it's hugely helpful. But first, number one, before we really get into all these different ways that I think you can find some more economical land, I'm going to start with one of the things that I had no idea when I bought my farm. So I have 26 acres here. That's a lot of land. And I was stoked and I was so excited. And before that, I was borrowing land from friends. I was renting small acreage to do my farm. And I knew I needed land. I wanted to buy land. It was just like that's the only thing I could think about was I wanted to buy property. I wanted to invest in property. And the thing was, I bought 26 acres and I was stoked. That was more land than I ever could have dreamed of. And now I have it. And I didn't need that much. I probably used maybe 15 of the 26 acres. And I've really started working towards utilizing that land better. Because ultimately, I was a flower farmer, a cut flower farmer. That was my profession. That's what drove me into farming in general. Was I was making money as a cut flower farmer. And I was only capable of farming on about 1 to 2 acres intensively. So I was underutilizing almost all of my property because I didn't need 26 acres. I physically didn't have the capacity to hand farm 26 acres. It just didn't make sense. And I didn't have livestock at the time. Now I have an entire herd of goats. I have cattle. So it's making a lot more sense for me to have this larger amount of space. So really take stock and inventory before you even start this process of how much space and how much land you really truly need. Because to be frank, my flower farming business, I was farming full time, really only needed 2 acres before it really started maxing out at the scale that I was doing it at. And to be honest, anything past that 2 acres was just sunk cost for me. And it just really depends on your priorities, right? But I'm pretty confident that there are people who could homestead full scale almost on 1/4 of an acre in a very, very subdivision-y lot. Like, you don't need 26 acres depending on what your goals are. Now, if you want 26 acres, you don't want to see your neighbors. Mind you, my 26 acres, if you look that way, not a neighbor in sight. If you look that way, I'm in a subdivision. So, whatever. Maybe you're going to need more than 26 acres to get away from your neighbors. But that's one of your goals. Completely fine. But just take stock of the size of property you need, and that can save you loads and loads of money. If I had chosen not to buy 26 acres, let me say, I would have a lot smaller mortgage. Just saying. And yes, I have a mortgage on this property. Now, that brings me into the best way. Should I start with the best way? You know what? I'm not going to start with the best way. I don't want to start with the best way because I want you to scroll all the way to the end. Now, if you want to know the best way, in my opinion, just go ahead and skip there. But don't skip because I'm a delight and I really don't think you should skip. So we'll save the best for last, but this is a great way as well. One of the options I think that a lot of farmers need to know about is grants. So there are loads of first-time farm buying grants. So if you are a first-time farmer, you can often qualify for rural loans. You can typically get longer length loans, which is different than your traditional length mortgage. And what that does is it also allows you to compile some of your farm startup expenses in that larger loan. Now, as someone who's very debt adverse, I don't completely mind debt like a mortgage, but I personally would not take on those loans because I don't like having a ton of debt financially. I don't think it works out best for me in the long term. But if you're starting your own farming enterprise and you have a solid business plan and strategy, but you're lacking the capital, these farmer grants, where they provide you first-time farm buying loans, farm loans, you can absolutely use a percentage of that loan to invest in machinery and equipment to get your farm started, to get it productive. If you are just going to homestead and subsistence farm, I do not recommend that, because those loans are for fully functioning businesses and enterprises. If you are just trying to cut down on your food costs, if you're trying to produce most of your own stuff, that's really not going to be the best solution. But there are tons of grants. I can't speak to all of the grants because each state has their own programs. Tennessee has some amazing programs to incentivize small agricultural producers. It is the Tennessee program, goodness gracious, what is it called? Oh, no, I can't remember what it's called, of course, for this video. But basically the premise is you can take classes around your interest. And for example, we have taken a master sheep and goat producer course. And by doing that, we are eligible to offset certain expenses for our farm. So for example, there's a hay barn on the other side of this property that was built for hay storage. That was matched by the state, meaning we got a grant from the Tennessee state that paid for half of the construction of that barn because we are master goat sheep producers or master cattle producers. Or if you are interested in beekeeping, there are apiary courses that will help with the offset of apiary cost or honey spinning cost. There are so many. There's an agritourism one, there's a cattle producer one, there's equipment ones, there are livestock grants. So there's loads of options for you to get started on your farm. Now, those do not necessarily help you purchase your farm, but what they can do is, knowing that those grant programs are available in your area, they can greatly lessen the cost of setting your farm up, which can make the land cost more doable and more affordable if you know about those grants going into it. Additionally, Tennessee has greenbelt laws. And greenbelt laws, and all states have different variations of those laws. Not all states have greenbelt, but a lot of them do have variations of these. And if you have 15 consecutive acres of agricultural land, those acres are taxed at a different rate. So your property taxes are substantially lower, again, making the overall purchase of your farm more economical. And it's not to say there are grants that are buying your farm, but there are a lot of these different programs that will help you get your farm set up. And there are several different grants to help you purchase your farms as well. So just do your grant research, look for the free money that's out there, because let me tell you, farmers are aging out, and our country is doing everything they can to make sure farmers are staying put. They do not want farmers to stop growing food. So be sure and research your grants in your local areas. You can easily go to an agricultural extension office. Most of the universities around the country have these offices in place, and talk to them and see what is available for you, and they can set you on your right path. Next up, this one is a little more chaotic and a little crazy, but vacant land. I'm going to tell you, go ahead and just squat on some property. Now, I'm not telling you or advocating to be a squatter. Let me tell you, that's a dicey game to play. I listened to a story about this lady who squatted in this house, and she fixed up this house and was working on it. And it was, I think, 9.75 years. So she's almost at 10 years. And out of the blue, this owner who owned that property came back after she had renovated the entire property and redone everything. And since it was before a 10-year mark, that owner was able to claim the property back, even though they hadn't laid foot on it in almost 10 years. And that woman lost her entire property. So we're not advocating squatting. We don't want you to just sit on land and say, this is my land, stamp a flag in. That's not what we're doing here. But there is loads of vacant land all across the US, and a lot of people aren't talking about this. We, in my area particularly, somewhat close to Nashville, Tennessee, the thought that there's vacant land anywhere is crazy because real estate is in such high demand here. But there are loads of cities across the country where there are tons of abandoned lots, tons of abandoned buildings, and cities actually are building out programs for people to do stuff with that. So you can look around your neighborhood, see if there are abandoned places, see if there are abandoned buildings, go talk to the tax record people, see if that property is available, see what's going on with that property. Consider reaching out to nonprofits in your area. There are loads of nonprofits that are turning these vacant lots into community gardens. So if you're wanting to just start your growing journey, this might be a great place to do it. You could start with simple, small, little local lot that's been abandoned and left vacant, or just even some land that's like, oh my gosh, my neighbor has this amount of land, they're clearly not using it. Talk to them, see if they would be interested in sharing a portion of your vegetables, portion of your dream. Just go over there. So vacant land, just abandoned land or land that is being underutilized, just reach out to people. See what you can find. I think it's a great option. And I did mention community gardening, but I think this is a great start. If you have not done a lot of farming and homesteading yet, join a community garden, okay? Pay the fee to join a community garden because you're going to connect with people who are very like-minded, very similar, and there's a chance that someone will know of a piece of property a little further out that might work for you. Or they will know, how to grow this particular variety of vegetable, and you'll be able to share that knowledge share, and really create some community and some foundation before you start venturing on your own, before you purchase land. Now, this one is probably my kind of second favorite option. It is find a family member or a friend. Similar to that ask a neighbor, a lot of us already know someone who has some land and they're probably not using it for anything. They're probably just mowing a gigantic yard because they wanted a gigantic yard. Well, it's very easy to just ask those people if you can rent or lease that property from them. That's okay. People don't mind being asked that. The worst thing they can do is say, no, we're not going to do that. But, the best case scenario, they're going to be like, actually, you know what? I wouldn't mind a little extra cash this month. Go ahead. I didn't want to mow that anyways. It's very common in this area for people to lease out agricultural land. So consider leasing. You do not have to buy to build out a viable long-term enterprise. There are long-term leases. You can really start practicing. You can really start learning what's working for you. And before you make a commitment to purchasing this large property, you can understand what work it takes and if you even want to do it before you buy this giant piece of property and have this gigantic mortgage over your head. And let me tell you, if I had done that with a place like this, I would know that 26 acres was never going to work for me. It was just going to be too much. Now, I am making it work for me, but I did not ever need that. And I did do this. I did farm in a lease situation. I leased from my family. I even borrowed and leased from my brother at one point. But I always was like a little pie in the sky. I was like, all the things I could do if I had more land, So I didn't learn my lesson, but that's how I got started. And I built a farming business and a farming enterprise. And I sold cut flowers, and I became a large supplier of cut flowers, which I've only just recently stopped in the past few years. But that's how I got started, and that's what led me to this entire farm. So there's nothing wrong with taking your time, leasing some property before you get going. And this brings me into my absolute favorite and best way to get property in the US. Okay? This one is exactly what I've done. And I think people are not thinking about this a lot. The population of farmers is aging out. We're talking like average age of farmers being 65. And the bulk of those farmers are actually small farms. They're not this corporate entity that we always think about. We do often hear about these large corporations that are in charge of all of our food, but a lot of farms are still small local farms. And those people, almost none of them have a succession plan, meaning they don't know what the farm is doing once they're gone. Once they're done, once they hang up ye old hat, Nobody knows what happens to this place. They probably have kids who plan to sell it and get it developed. They do not have kids that are saying, yes, Papa, yes, Mama, we will take up the call and we will start the farm. That just doesn't exist right now. So, knowing that, this is where you can find your cheapest land. You go apprentice with these farmers. You learn from these farmers. And you try and become their succession plan. Now, I'm not talking about gold digging. We're not fortune hunting. We are none of that. What I am saying is these situations are truly happening where these farmers, they love their land. They care about their land. They don't want to just see their land developed. It's a lifestyle for them. This is what they're passionate about. And they want to grow old on their land. They don't want to sell it. There are probably a percentage that want to sell it and rake in their millions and call it a day, but the bulk of them would like to see that land stewarded in some way. And unfortunately, many of them don't have children that are willing to take up that call. You can be that person. You do not have to be searching for an inheritance. What I'm suggesting is you go learn from them. You go spend time with them and you try and strike up a lease to own contract, for sale by owner. You try to buy the farming enterprise from that specific farmer. Now, if you think that's not going to work even on a smaller scale, there are loads of small farmers that feel the exact same way. They live and breathe for their land. They want to die on their land. They love their land. You could be a great option. You could move in, you could take over the farming responsibility. You get all of that wonderful knowledge while letting that farmer spend time in the place that he or she loves. Seriously, I think it's an excellent way. And while I didn't quite fully do that, what I did do is I did a lease to own situation. So I bought for sale by owner. I purchased this farm, a family farm, to keep it intact as a family farm and continue to run that farm. And that is what I am still continuing to do to this day. And I'm very passionate about that. And because of that, there's a lot of options, right? So since you're not necessarily financing through the bank, and write it all up, make sure there's legal contracts, legal documentation. Nobody is doing this on a handshake, right? We are doing this legitimately. We don't want anyone to misunderstand anything. We want it all legal and dotted lines, T's topped, all the things. So, but because of that, I was able to purchase this entire property at a lower interest rate than I would have been able to do so if I had gotten funded through a credit union or a traditional bank. And it gave me a lot more flexible terms. And it also set me up with all the knowledge and the skills for the farm. So I got all the additional history and knowledge that came from the transaction that traditional sellers might not be as likely to share because they just want to sell the house. They don't want you negotiating and wheeling and dealing because the roof is cracked. They are maybe here to make money, not here to see you succeed. Well, I walked in with a full understanding, a full scope of what was going on with this entire property. And because of that, I think it allowed me to be better prepared overall. So I think that's one of the best options. Loads of farmers are aging out. Consider building out a partnership where you purchase directly from the farmer. That actually brings me to another point about this property and about searching for property in general. You don't have to have a pristine, perfect piece of property. Lots and lots of people get it in their mind, I want this cute little house and I want it on rolling gorgeous acres, blah, blah, blah. Let me tell you something about my house. My house, not cute. My house, a disaster. I purchased this property for the land, not for the house. And additionally, when I purchased my piece of property, it's not the highest quality land. There are 15 acres of floodplain which cannot consistently be utilized for traditional agriculture or traditional development, which meant I was able to get it way, way cheaper. But what those pastures can be utilized for, they make excellent grazing pastures during dry times, particularly this season, which has been an entire drought. And we've been able to maintain grass the entire time because the water table is very high down there and we have a pretty consistent moisture level down there that has allowed the grass to continue to grow, whereas the upper level acreage has not done so. So I've been able to find value in it where other people probably would have overlooked. Additionally, it makes excellent haying grass, and you can also grow a lot of these reedy type hardywood perennials for the cut flower industry that really like a lot of moisture. So there's a lot of stuff I can do with that piece of property that not everyone's going to see value in, but I see value in it. And because I'm willing to have a different property that's a little more unique and maybe not as traditionally valuable, I was able to afford a lot more for the dollar I had to spend. So that's one of my other things. For example, my family's first initial farm actually was next door to a dump. So it was not cute. The dump had been put to bed, but because of that, there was a lot of random stuff that still had kind of been dumped over onto our property. We had spent a ton of time cleaning it up and working it and improving it, and wasn't an ideal, picturesque, gorgeous farm. No, but it was in my family's budget, and we were paycheck to paycheck, barely feeding our household. And that was really important to us, to be able to have some farmland and to be able to start growing our own produce. And yes, we absolutely did it beside a dump. So my point is, it's not always postcard perfect, but there are ways you can do it if you truly want. I think the biggest thing is that you're gonna have to make some sacrifices. So you might not get everything on your wish list if you're truly trying to start out on your farming journey, unless you just got mad money. And if you got mad money, go for it, honey. I don't really care what you do. Enjoy it. But if you're like me and you don't have it, you're gonna have to make some sacrifice. You're not gonna get the top quality land. You're going to have to negotiate terms. Maybe find a farmer who is looking for a succession plan. Lease to own. Literally lease to own that farm. Gain all the knowledge. Build the knowledge into the price, because let me tell you, that knowledge is so important. And look for grants. Look at the different options. Look at the other tax shelter incentives that you can have from having a farm that can help make farming more affordable for you. So I hope this episode, or this video rather, was helpful, and I hope you find the property of your dreams. If you have any additional questions about how I found my property or what you should be looking for in a property, please comment below, reach out, let us know. As always, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and I'll see you next time.